brighter than light. He'll give you strife. He's Todd. He's tall, he's mean, he's labeling machine. He's Todd. Rides a motorbike, he'll tell you what it's like. He's Todd. Don't know what he'll say, he'll scare the kids away. He's Todd. He's Todd.
Hey, good morning out there. Man, thanks for tuning in again. Episode, what, 24? God, has it been this long? 23? Who's losing? I've lost track of all this, but it's good to be up and about, good to be upright. I hope everyone's healthy out there. I hope everyone enjoyed their Thanksgiving. It was kind of a weird Thanksgiving, I'm sure, for everyone, but we made it through it, and I'm 2 pounds, we're getting another 2 pounds at least, so that's 38 since COVID. That's why I have the table up so high. So anyway, again, thanks for joining BS with Todd. And part of what we're doing is it's all about labeling, the exciting world of labeling. And we're starting to introduce different guests. Last week, we had Blake Ermos from Low Volt Nation on there. I hear it was a fantastic show. So I want to thank Blake for jumping on last week. Couple of things I got for you is I show this every week, all right, and I did this a long time ago, only to show you how tough our labels are. This has been encased in water for many weeks. Legally, I can't tell you how long it's been in here, but it's been in here for a long time. I did have one in oil, but I dropped it. I broke it. And I've got the stains to show it right below me here. So anyway, we talked about the new product a while back. We've got our new flags available. So check that out. Reach out to myself or your brother rep if you have any questions. And then we have some new self-laminating label as well to match those job environments where they don't want to change to the our traditional cable wrap. So also keep that in mind. This week, we've talked about labeling racks, and we've talked about labeling doodads, and we've talked about the machines and stuff like that, but we really haven't talked about the other component in labeling, and there's many. There's a plethora of components, but we haven't talked about labeling active electronics. So what I've done is I've invited somebody that's very near and dear. I've invited my brother Sam. I know I'm reaching at the bottom of the barrel with this, kind of a last minute thing. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, Sam has been in this industry for a very long time. And not only is he an RCDD, but he's got a ton of other monikers, MCSE, CNNI, sometimes he's an ASS. But anyway, he's been on the infrastructure side of the fence, and now he's one of the largest voice over IP contractors there in Colorado. And I'm not going to name who his customers are, but he does a really good job, kind of focused on Avaya voice over IP, and he'll talk about that in a little bit. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about this morning was labeling active electronics. It's very important to label your infrastructure. You want to know where your cable's going. You want to know your port identification. You want to know your workstation outlet identification. And a lot of that has to do with not only troubleshooting, but asset management as well. And it's kind of a drop in the bucket until you get to the active electronics, and you talk about a big asset there. I got to be careful how I say that. But those are very expensive assets, and those are the brains, and they're carrying a lot of information. So from a troubleshooting aspect, it's very important to label those as well. And then from an asset management, from a network administrator's perspective, it gives them an idea of exactly what's out there. And technology is changing all the time, and things are getting faster and quicker and smaller. And so, all of these are changed out quite a bit. And so, you got to be able to track what's going out, what's coming in. Port identification is very important as well. So that's kind of what Sam deals in. And I just want to, let me see if I can do this. I'm going to share a screen here. Let me see if this works. And let's see what pops up here. So here's, oh, here we go. So here's me and Sam. And I think this is the day that Sam was actually brought home from the orphanage. I'm not sure, but obviously I'm the better looking one on the right hand side. You'll be able to tell Sam when he gets on screen here. Here's another little, oh, this is a good one. All right, so here's me and Sam having a little bit of fun, if you will. Gosh, I think this was in Azle, Texas. And then the last one I want to show you is this one. And this was actually at my wedding, believe it or not. I was the guest band at my own wedding. Kind of weird how that worked out, but that's the other Mr. Morse on the drum set back there. He's a very accomplished percussionist, if you will. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'm going to introduce Mr. Sam Morse. Sam, you out there? Well, what'd you think of those pictures there, Sam?
Oh my God.
Yeah, well. So Sam is there was a song written about Sam a long time ago, half the man he used to be. And as you saw on those pictures, Sam really is half the man he used to be. Sam has dropped down 50 pounds, or almost to the waif level, the supermodel level. Sam is a stage 3 cancer survivor. And so, I personally am glad he's still around, but part of it is he looks great. People always ask, right? And I'm going to throw this out there, Sam. I have to, man, because it really peeves you off. But when me and Sam get together, obviously they can tell who the more handsome brother is, but they can also tell we're brothers. And it's inevitable somebody is going to ask who the older brother is. All right. I've actually got Sam by 4 years, believe it or not. But nonetheless, I love it very much. Thank you for joining me this morning, Sam. How's the weather up there in Fort Collins?
It is cold. It's when I got up this morning, it was 17 degrees. I think we're going to make it up to a balmy 37, 38.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I moved out of Colorado. And obviously I'm on the coast. I'm out of Carlsbad, California, for those who don't know me. It's going to be a balmy 72 or 73 today at some point. But the wind is pretty massive. We've got some Santa Anas, which by the time those Santa Anas reach you guys in Colorado, those things turn into snow. So yeah. So Sam has been in the industry for many, many, many moons. And it pains me to think of, it was in September of '96, Sam. I was working for the city of Carlsbad, California, slinging asphalt, doing concrete, and actually working for a living. And Sam called me up and he says, hey, I'm starting a company, pulling cable. I had no idea what the hell he was talking about. So, I made one of those leaps of faith, packed everything up and moved out to Azle, Texas. And throughout all these years, even up until this point, me and Sam have been involved in a lot of different ventures. We owned several companies in Texas, low voltage. We were contractors. We actually recabled the largest airline in the world. I'm not going to mention who that is, but we took everything from ABAM, Type 1. I mean, they had everything. And we were brought into this project to basically redo all their fiber from 62.5 to 50 micron. And we're talking about every place on the planet. And then at that time, all right, it was the Belden 1701A, I think, right, Sam? Was it the A?
Yeah.
Yeah, with the Panduit CJE5E88 T-Jacks or something like that. And then we were using those old Unicams. Unicams just came out, and I remember it was interesting. So myself and Sam were involved in that, and he was played a very integral role as far as the infrastructure design and implementation from that point. And then we kind of moved. Well, he's in Colorado, I'm here, and he's still a contractor. In fact, you know what, Sam, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. Talk a little bit about Sam is the owner of Sof-Tech Maintenance in Fort Collins, Colorado, and he's very much under the radar, doing what he does, but they're incredibly busy. So, Sam, I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. Let us a little bit about Sof-Tech.
Yeah, thanks. Sof-Tech is a systems integrator. We do a little bit of everything. We're still doing structured cabling, both twisted pair, fiber, but really where the sandbox where we play is on the voice over IP side. So with VoIP, it involves data, it involves structured cabling, it still involves TDM, which is wonderful because you get these new VoIP contractors out there today, and you ask them to hook up a PRI or some analog trunks, and these guys don't have a clue. I mean, TDM's a different world to some of these folks, but as that whole thing is progressing in the contractor space, so we mainly do enterprise customers. We do have some smaller customers as well, but mainly enterprise. We do a lot of work with the federal government, as well as large enterprises, really from the Denver area on up. So, yeah, I've been doing it a long time, and I wanted to add, you've inspired me with your labels that you've had drenched in liquids all this time to kind of show, how really tough these labels are and how they can withstand these environments. I want to show you. I did a test. And I want you to see that it failed, right? And so I want to tell you that sulfuric acid, by the way, will eat the label. It'll eat the test tube as well. So anyway, it all came. This was a longer tube when I started, but I'm just saying that I wanted to see some real world tests, and I figured, what's more real world than putting a label in some sulfuric acid to see, how strong it is. So, good showing. I think there's still a little bit of the label down there at the bottom. I don't know if you can read that, but anyway, I really thank you for that.
Well, no worries. So enough about you. Let's get back to me.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's all about Todd on this show. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, obviously, was labeling. So you've been involved in labeling the passive electronics from your infrastructure, whether it be copper, fiber, labeling the patch panels, the face plates, labeling the rack, grounding, basically everything ANSI TIA 606C, which is now. So you've been involved with that as well. But let's go down south as far as the active electronics. And one of the things I was talking about in my monologue here was asset management. Number one, because they're very expensive electronics. Number two is that troubleshooting. If it's not labeled properly, obviously, time is money. And the more time you spend troubleshooting, at the end of the day, it's going to cost that customer more money. So if you have a minute, Sam, from an active electronic standpoint, as far as, the ports and the IP addresses and so forth and whatnot, give us your take on that, the importance of that.
Absolutely. One of the things that we always do whenever we're labeling any equipment, we use this guy right here, and that's that security laminate tape. So especially from an asset management standpoint, because one of the things that someone can do, obviously, is peel a label off. and walk away. So we like to use that particular tape because if the label's been peeled off, we know it's been peeled off. The customer knows it's been peeled off. And so we use that quite a bit on these electronics. And so one of the things we like to do from a labeling standpoint is, one, we always put the host name of the device. So when you're thinking about network electronics, everything on a network has a host name, right? It not only does it have the IP address, but it's got a host name that is referenced back to an IP address. From a security standpoint, what we never do is we never label any active electronics with its IP address, right? If somebody has breached your physical security, if they're in your server room, and what's the easiest thing for them to look at is a label with an IP address. It's kind of like the old days of writing down your password and putting it underneath your keyboard, right? It's the first place I'm going to look. So we're mindful of how we label active electronics. Generally, it's a host name. If we're in a data center, especially the ANSI 606C standards come into play because, we're going to have a rack designation. We're going to have which use it's on within the rack. We may also a lot of times put, or we do a lot of times, we'll designate the PDU, especially with servers, some of the more industrial switches and routers, you'll have multiple power supplies. And so you're going to have those power supplies generally going into different power sources. And so we like to label those devices as to which power supply, which cable goes into which PDU, which UPS. And to that extent, we label the active electronics with that. We label both ends of the power cable with that as well. So that if someone's looking through a jumbled mess of power cables, we can at least find ours. We know where it is. We know exactly where it goes. Same thing with patch cables that are going into those electronics. We like to label those patch cables with where that cable is plugged in on one end and where it's going to on the other end. So we can always look at that label and see, okay, this is coming from, switch A, port 22, and that's going to, device ATEL 23 port 5 sort of thing. So we can, from end to end, when we look at all components, whether it's power cables, the device itself, patch cables, we have all of that labeled. Sometimes it's real easy to throw labels on a device if there's room on the device. So, you look at something like that, and I've got ample room for labeling, right? If I turn that thing around, I've got room for labeling. Okay, that makes it nice. You can put whatever you want on that device. Where it's getting difficult these days, because of port density in these devices, you take a look at something like that, where are you going to put a label? I mean, there isn't one. In fact, a lot of these new, and Cisco's kind of guilty of it, they're even thinner. So the bezels along here are even thinner, so there's no place you can put a label, right? Because I've got LEDs on this side. About the only place I can really stick a label is right here above where these GBICs are. So what happens is, a lot of times what we do is we'll put the label, somewhere along here. Well, when this thing's sitting in a rack, flush mounted, and you've got device stacked upon device, having that label sitting on top of the device does you no good, right? Servers. As an example, I just happened to carry this one around in my back pocket. There's really no place to label it on the front other than, right over here where this server actually has a DVD drive. Most new servers don't, right? So they're all at about 1U these days, even multi-core, multi-processor servers. And this whole faceplate area, the whole bevel area, is completely covered up, right? It's very difficult to stick a label on there. So sometimes you have to revert to putting your label on the rack to the side of the device. If you're in a 4-post or 2-post, you got to label the rack itself with those labels. Another problem too is these servers, when you're in a high density server farm, if you put that label up here and you slide the server into the rack, you're not going to see it, right? It's covered up because you've got another server sitting on top of this thing. And you look at the back, it's not a whole lot of space there either. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that when it comes to active electronics, depending upon what you have and depending upon how you're trying to label it, you have to be creative. You have to figure out, okay, where can I put a label to where I can see something? And sometimes if you've got a two-port relay rack, you can label the device on the side, right? So it just depends on where you can really put those labels on the device, and then again, how you label it. Host names, location names, things of that nature. Love that security laminated tape for those purposes, but it just sometimes it's hard to do it. But obviously, it can be done. It has to be done. These devices have to be labeled for everyone involved. So there's my rundown on the importance of kind of how we do it and why we do it. Certain things that we stay away from. Again, IPs, bad idea. I've walked into server rooms before where they've had the administrator username and password on a label on the device, and it's like, let's take that off of there.
Well, at least they labeled. You got to give them a little credit. At least they labeled. So a couple of things that my takeaways, Sam. And what Sam was talking about is our tamper evident tape. And so we do make a tamper evident tape. And essentially what that does is it comes in a cassette, obviously. If you peel the corner up, number one, it won't adhere back to that device or whatever it's labeled to. So it's been monkeyed with. And then it leaves a checkerboard pattern. So some of the areas that I see those being used are in custom cabinets, custom racks, servers, and essentially if the integrator, such as yourself, Sam, you can even print if this label's been tampered with, the warranty is null and void, or there's all sorts of things you can do with that. So we do offer tamper evident tape. The other thing is that Sam is absolutely right. With all the new technology today in the infrastructure, they're trying to cram 10 gallons of crap into a 5-gallon bucket, right? So everything's getting real tight up here. A couple of weeks ago, I showed this Leviton angled patch panel where there's really no room to label anything. I'm using, it's hard to see down here, but I'm using, Sam actually provided me with the server here, and there's very, very little room to label this. However, as an option, we do carry our 9/64 tape. It's called the TZEN 201, and I'm using that on the Leviton angled patch panel up here. We're the only manufacturer that makes a tape this small. I still see contractors going in with 3/8" tape, and they're cutting off the top and they're cutting off the bottom to try and fit into either a high density patch panel, or if you have high density active electronics, or even some of the passive electronics out there as well. That is an option. There are going to be times, like Sam said, to where you're not going to be able to really affix a label to that. One of the things you may want to think about out there is using a micro QR code. You can embed all of that information into that QR code and strategically place that somewhere there. And obviously don't put your IP address on there, but the information that you may have for that active electronic, date of install and any other information that Sam aforementioned potentially could be put into some type of QR code, which anybody in the IT department, essentially, instead of physically reading a label, they scan that QR code and that information comes up on their phone. So those are just options. But bottom line is identification is very, very important, not only on your passive infrastructure side, but your active side as well. Sam, you got anything else you want to chime in?
I was going to say, just to add to that, where we're really starting to see QR codes are in data centers. The more progressive the IT department is, the more that the quicker that they're adopting those QR codes. So we're starting to see those more and more that are out there. I mean, for the longest time, we always used a microdot. And the problem was, trying to read that microdot. It was literally, you're on your hands and knees with a magnifying glass, and Vern, bless his heart, would spend hours and hours etching those damn things. It was just maniacal. But yeah, I love how technology has progressed, in the past 100 years.
Yeah, well, Sam, we appreciate your input this morning. We've got a couple minutes left. And again, I want to thank you for getting, I know it's very early for you up in Fort Collins, so thanks for getting up early to join the show. With that being said, again, Sam, have a great day. Thank you very much. If you have any questions for Sam, I think we're going to show his information at the end of the show. Again, it'll have his phone number, his email address. Any questions regarding what kind of we went over today and how Sam does his labeling? Bottom line is that he is labeling, which I thank you for. But any questions you have for Sam, please reach out to him. We'll also show our information at the end of the broadcast here in a couple of minutes. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or as I always say, if you need any bad advice, I've got years and years of experience at that. Please reach out to me as well. Cut his microphone off. He's done. He's done. So speaking of future shows, so we're going to go kind of a different direction here on some of the future shows. Abrasion resistance. So what I'm going to do is going to be a little bit different. So I'll get on here and I'll say good morning and blah, 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 blah. But I'm going to actually pre-tape some stuff. And I'm going to show me taking things like, well, it's out of my reach, grinders and wire brushes and to basically back up my BS as far as how tough the label is. Then we've got another one on January 7th having to do with water and liquids. And obviously I show this every week, but we're going to go way beyond that. We're talking pressure washers, fish tanks, all sorts of goofy stuff that I think you'll really enjoy. And again, it backs up my BS as far as how tough the label is. And we're going to try the live stuff mixed in. I used that GoPro on a previous episode. And I liked it, but the thing is, it's moving around, and it was getting people, sick to their stomachs. And I'd like to think it was the camera, not me. But regardless, so we're going to do things a little bit different. So join us December 17th. One of the other things we're going to look at is going outside of LinkedIn Live as well to gather a broader audience. Stay tuned for that. We don't want to limit ourselves, and we've had hundreds of thousands of viewers right now, and obviously there's more out there that we'd like to bring into the family. So anyway, December 17th, the abrasion resistant test, January 7th, under the sea test, the scrub-a-dub, if you will. As far as the brother team, all right, Kate, if you could put that up there when you get the opportunity. So to contact us regarding labeling, all right, you got me here in Carlsbad, California, Mr. Jamie Brookover in Virginia Beach. You got Mr. Dan Cobb in Wisconsin. You got Mr. Bruce Page out in the Marblehead. Mr. Rob Dawkins, North Carolina, and our glorious leader in Bradenton, Florida, Mr. Craig Robinson. I'm going to show Kate, if we can, let's show Sam's information in case you want to reach out to Sam and from a real world value, not somebody that's jaded myself. By the way, Sam, the check's in the mail. But hey, you were supposed to turn off his mic. Anyway, contact Sam if you have any questions regarding what he does, how he does it, best practices regarding active electronics or even infrastructure. Again, he's a real cool data dude, so he knows infrastructure as well. But from a contractor integrator standpoint, reach out to Sam with any questions or comments. With that being said, it is 10:30. Sam, I want to thank you again very, very much for joining me this morning. That's really it. Sam, thank you. Everyone out there, thank you. Oh, if you want to see this episode again, go to brothermobilesolutions.com, click on the BS with Todd link. It'll take you to a page where you can view all the previous episodes. And again, thank you. Have a safe week out there, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Kate, for putting up the next episode there. Chuck, I may take you up on that pressure washer. It's good to see everyone out there. Blake, good to see you as well. So again, with that being said, closing credits, we're out. Sam, thank you very much. Have a good day.
See ya.